All right. So, Lawrence, I think we're going to kick it over to you. And I think since we've been through some of this stuff before, if we want to just start diving into the outcome areas, and then also know that anyone listening, we also have Sana Kendall here, who is our recovery manager. If there are questions related more specifically to recovery efforts, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A as well. So with that, Lawrence, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you. Can you see the economic health page? Thank you. So there's three outcomes that we're covering tonight. First is economic health, and then we'll talk about culture and recreation, and then lastly, our seventh outcome area, which is called high performing government. So economic health is our first one, and we define that as Fort Collins promotes a healthy, sustainable economy reflecting community values. The funding for economic health in total is $176.7 million, which appears to be the single largest outcome. And if you look just at our outcomes and the amount of money that's in each of those, you might think that by far and away that the city's primary, most important outcome is economic health. In reality, all 7 of our outcomes are very important. And the driver for the reason this is such a large outcome is primarily because of light and power. You can see from the funding sources that it is the most significant funding source for this. And of that 117 million, about 95 million is for purchase of electricity from Platte River Power Authority. And so that does inflate the numbers, but that is a true expense to the city, and that's why it is shown here. Other funding sources of significance are broadband at its highest level yet at 25 million. We would expect this to grow over time as we build out the system. The DDA is included at 23 million. This is a placeholder amount for them because they will actually, their board of directors will approve their budget in October, and then we'll update our materials for when we go to our readings with our council in November. And then there's the Urban Renewal Authority, which is dedicated to this outcome at just under 6 million, and then general fund contributions of 4.7 million. Of the things that are in the budget that are ongoing in nature, different programs and services that we have been providing, the following ones are recommended for continuation. So overall business support for within the Economic Health Office, downtown landscaping and maintenance. This is not only for, you think of the sidewalks and the flowers, the lights in the winter, but this is also the parks that are downtown or in the proximity of downtown. We have the electrical utility services, broadband, the URA, and the DDA, which we spoke about with our funding. And then some changes in the budget. We had $15 million of reductions in the 2021 budget, so the budget for this year. And we anticipated that there would be a number of requests to restore those. We actually had about 4.7 million of the 15 that has been requested to be restored. And so there's partial funding in all of the outcomes except for high performing government. And then the American Rescue Plan, this should say, instead of American Recovery Plan, it provided funding for the Economic Health Strategic Plan, which will obviously have a big impact on our local businesses. There's also funding in this for a minority business specialist, as well as improvements to the Oak Street Plaza and the fountains that are there. Our second outcome is culture and recreation, which we define as Fort Collins provides and maximizes access to diverse cultural and recreational amenities. The funding from here is primarily from the general fund, coming in at 16.4 million of the nearly, or just over 40 million total for this outcome. And then not surprising, there's relatively similar contributions from our recreation fund, cultural services, so think of that's the Lincoln Center, Museum of Discovery. Then we have our neighborhood parkland, so the building, the creation of those new parks, golf, community capital improvement program. We'll talk about the specific things that are funded from there, as well as conservation trust, which is primarily used for build out of our trail system. as well as the cemeteries. So the ongoing programs that are recommended for continuation, all the recreational programs and aquatic activities. So you can see a number of them listed here and those programs, as well as the adaptive recreation opportunities within recreation, the overall parks and trails. So that's not only the creation of new, but the maintenance of all the wonderful amenities we currently have within those systems. The Museum of Discovery, park planning for the remaining build out of our park system, the gardens on Spring Creek, the Lincoln Center, golf, and then art in public places, which is a nice amenity that all of our residents and visitors get to experience with art all around town that comes from our capital project tax, or the 1% requirement that capital projects have to contribute to art in public places. And then additional funding that is recommended for culture and recreation this year. Again, we have those partial restorations of the reductions from last year, or the 2021 budget. And then the American Rescue Plan Act funding for a number of things. So increased funding for a reduced fee scholarship program that had been at about $190,000. That's actually going to increase by $100,000 to $290,000. We have a similar access fund for low-income residents within our cultural services. So think about that as access to Lincoln Center, Museum of Discovery, Gardens on Spring Creek. And then lastly, the Cultural Services Community Programs Manager with program support. So those four things all being recommended for funding from ARPA. Then we do have recreational trail development. So this is the continuation of building additional trail per the master plan. And then the community capital improvement taxes are quarter-cent tax, 10-year tax approved by the voters for capital projects. And the one that's applicable for culture and recreation is the design and beginning of the construction for the Southeast Community Center. And then lastly, of our 7 outcomes is high-performing government, which we define as Fort Collins exemplifies an efficient, innovative, transparent, effective, and collaborative city government. The funding from here is mostly from the general fund for a broad range of services. The way I like to characterize high-performing government, it's a little different as far as an outcome compared to our other 6, because most of those other 6, it's outwardly facing programs and services that the community, businesses, residents can utilize. High-performing government is slightly different in that it's a lot of the behind the scenes. How do we actually go about providing those programs and services to our community? And so that's the type of activities that make up high-performing government. The most of that supported by the general fund. From an employee perspective, we have a benefits fund. Then we have utilities with the customer service and administration function. Those being, in that case, those utilities, that is very much customer facing, externally facing. The equipment fund for fleet and other major repairs in the city. We are a self-insured organization, so that is budgeted. And data and communications is the last larger one. That's a fancy way of saying IT or internet technology. And then as far as what is recommended for continuation for ongoing programs and services, our elected officials in driving strategy and policy for the organization and our community, utilities customer service, our special events and volunteer coordination, communication along with FCTV and public engagement, business licensing and sales tax collection, purchasing of various equipment and services for city operations, employment services, so you think about traditionally human resources, city vehicles and buildings, as well as passports. And then additional things that are recommended for funding, primarily within the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA. We have the facility restroom and common area, additional cleaning, expanded community outreach and engagement, which also includes dedicated funding for translation and interpretation. And then language access services, specifically for city council meetings and other high priority civic engagements. That also has money for translation and interpretation. Other things that are recommended within this budget are the new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, which we're very excited about, our council redistricting study, the state legislative advocacy, where we locally can have a voice with our state legislatures. And then lastly, a citywide soft phone integration for a mobile workforce. And so looking at opportunities to reduce costs and get rid of traditional landlines for other opportunities leveraging current technology. And with that, we will, I'll stop sharing and we will open up for any questions that participants have.
Thanks, Lawrence. We don't have any questions at the moment, but maybe I'll give it a little bit of time here and see if anything pops up. And if not, then we close and wrap up a little bit early this evening.
And Amanda, maybe because we are recording this, I should still do the last slide of the upcoming council engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm not seeing questions pop up, so I think you gave a thorough overview. If you want to, oh, maybe I have one. Yes, okay, so general question, if there is an offer that didn't get funded, is the best course to discuss that with council now?
Yes, absolutely. Because the city has, we have provided our recommendations to our elected officials. This is the part of the process where our council, as representatives of our entire community, will take input from businesses, residents, organizations for changes that people would like to see from the recommended budget, whether that's things to be added that were not funded or things that are funded that people don't think should be. But communication with council is the best direction to do that now. They'll be taking those inputs and providing guidance to council or to city staff, I mean, on what they want changed for first reading in November.
Great, thank you, Lawrence. That's a good segue into your next slide, which kind of talks about what that next step process looks like and how people can continue to stay engaged and provide their input.
Very good. I will go ahead and share again. So just one last slide here. These are the upcoming dates for where council will be discussing the budget. We have 3 total work sessions. The first one is on the 14th of September, where we will be discussing the outcomes of culture and recreation, economic health, environmental health, and transportation and mobility. Then a week later, we will have our first of 2 budget hearings where any resident may speak their mind about what they like or dislike about the recommended budget. The second work session to dive into outcomes is scheduled for the 28th of this month, where we'll discuss neighborhood livability and social health, safe community, and then high performing government. That's followed a week later by our second of 2 budget public hearings. And then our last scheduled work session is on October 12th. And that's general discussion about all offers under consideration across all 7 outcomes and the final guidance from council of what they would like to see modified to bring back to them for first reading. That first reading is scheduled for November 2nd, and then second reading 2 weeks later on the 16th. And that's the rest of the canned materials that we have prepared.
Great, thank you, Lawrence. Well, appreciate your time this evening, and thanks to all who were able to join us. A little bit of a smaller crew tonight, but we have this recorded. So if you want to share this out, please visit the Our City page. Yeah, Lawrence.
And all 3 of the sessions that we had are recorded. And so since we did an abbreviated intro overview, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act, if you would like to see that specific content on the Our City page, so it's ourcity.fcgov.com, you can click on the Budget 2022 project, and then you'll be able to see these recordings and get that content.
Very good, yes. and feel free to share. Thank you again for your time this evening, and I hope everyone has a nice rest of the night tonight. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.